Zahara, a kind and quiet woman from Kabwe, Zambia, was busy preparing the biggest dinner of her life. The long table was set for 14 guests, shining with clean plates, glasses, and colorful decorations. She had invited two sides of her family, who had not spoken in years, hoping to bring peace and love back into their lives. Zahara smiled softly as she stirred the pot of egusi soup, grilled the tilapia just right, and fluffed the jollof rice. Everything looked perfect, but not everything was perfect. Her sister, Ifeanyi, had just arrived from Makurdi, Nigeria, and brought more than just gifts. She carried a secret, one that could break Zahara's heart. Ifeanyi watched Zahara moving around the kitchen with care, feeling the weight of what she knew. She didn't want to ruin the evening, but the truth was heavy on her chest. Zahara, unaware, welcomed her with a big hug and told her, "Tonight is going to fix everything." Ifeanyi nodded, but inside, she knew tonight might actually break everything. The house smelled like home. The laughter was slowly building as the guests arrived, but under all the joy, tension was rising like steam from the food. Zahara had set the stage for peace, but unknowingly, she had also prepared the perfect trap. And soon, with one truth, everything she thought was whole would begin to crack. The dinner was ready. The guests were seated, but the real feast was about to begin. The dining room was full of smiles, clinking glasses, and the rich smell of food that Zahara had cooked with love and care. Everything looked perfect. The table was set for 14. The family members were chatting, and laughter floated through the air like music. Zahara, dressed in a soft blue wrapper, looked like the happiest host. But just as she was about to announce dinner, her sister Ifeanyi gently touched her arm. Her voice was low, almost shaking. "Zahara, please, can I talk to you alone?" Zahara, surprised but trusting, nodded and followed her into the hallway, away from the crowd. Ifeanyi looked nervous. Her fingers were clenched, and her eyes were full of worry. She took a deep breath, then finally said the words that had been heavy on her chest since she arrived. "Zahara, I didn't just come to visit. I found out something. I didn't want to ruin this night, but I can't keep it from you. Tajudeen, your husband, he's cheating with Auntie Mambo's niece." The words hit like thunder. Zahara felt like the walls were closing in. Her chest tightened, her ears rang. For a second, she couldn't breathe. She looked at Ifeanyi, hoping it was a bad joke or a mistake. But her sister's face told her it was true. Pain shot through her heart like a sharp knife. Still, Zahara didn't cry. She didn't shout. She stood tall, though her heart was breaking. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. With a soft, steady voice she whispered, "Let's eat first." Ifeanyi blinked in surprise. "Are you okay?" Zahara nodded, though her eyes were glassy. "I will be," she said. Then she turned and walked back into the room, her smile returning like a mask. She poured juice, welcomed guests, and called everyone to the table. But inside, something had changed. Zahara wasn't just a host anymore. She was a woman holding back a storm, and when it came, it wouldn't be quiet. Everyone gathered around the big dining table, talking, laughing, and passing plates of food. The room was full of warmth. The smell of jollof rice, egusi soup, and grilled tilapia made everyone smile. Aunties were chatting loudly, uncles were cracking jokes, and children were sneaking pieces of meat when no one was looking. Zahara stood at the head of the table, smiling politely as she watched everyone enjoy the meal she had prepared with love. Her hands moved with grace as she served food, poured drinks, and nodded at compliments. But inside, her heart was frozen. Her smile was just for show. Under the warm yellow lights, Zahara's eyes were no longer soft. They were sharp now, watching everything like a hawk. She sat down slowly, her mind racing, but her face calm. She started to notice the little things she hadn't seen before. The stolen glances between Tajudeen and one of the guests, a woman dressed in a bright red gele. That woman had come with Auntie Mambo, and was sitting directly across from Tajudeen. Zahara watched how her husband looked at her. A quick glance here, a small smile there. She noticed how the woman's laugh grew louder when Tajudeen spoke. How their eyes met for a second too long. Nobody else seemed to notice. Everyone was too busy eating and laughing. But Zahara saw it all. And every second felt like a needle pricking her skin. The food was delicious. Grace had been said. Plates were full. But the real meal being served was something else. Quiet secrets, hidden shame, and silent pain. And Zahara was done pretending not to taste it. She didn't say a word. She just watched, taking it all in. Every look. Every smirk. Every lie floating in the air like smoke. She kept her hands folded on her lap, her back straight, her heart steady. Zahara knew what she was doing. And this dinner was only the beginning. The room was alive with laughter and full bellies. Plates were almost empty, and the air smelled of spices, roasted fish, and sweet drinks. Everyone was relaxed, their voices loud with stories, teasing, and laughter. Then Tajudeen stood up slowly, holding his glass. He smiled like a proud husband and looked around the table. "I just want to say," he began, "this night means so much to me. To have both families here, united, sharing food and love, it's a dream come true." People clapped and nodded. He looked over at Zahara and smiled. "And to my dear wife Zahara, the queen of this home, thank you for making this beautiful night happen." Zahara smiled and raised her glass. Her eyes met his, but there was no love in them, just quiet strength. Everyone lifted their drinks, about to toast, but under the table, something small and silent happened. Ifyananya, sitting beside Zahara, reached under the table and placed a folded piece of paper into Zahara's hand. Zahara took it calmly, her face never changing, as if nothing had happened. She opened it slowly under the tablecloth. Her eyes scanned the paper quickly. There it was, screenshots of flirty messages, hotel booking receipts, and even a letter Tajudeen had accidentally sent to Ifyananya, thinking she was his mistress. The words on the page felt like fire, but Zahara didn't flinch. She only blinked once and placed the paper gently in her lap. The room clinked with glasses and laughter. Tajudeen sat back down, his hand brushing Zahara's as if everything was perfect. Zahara gave him a soft smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Inside, she was no longer just a wife. She was something else now, calm, knowing, and ready. Her heart had broken earlier, but now it was building something sharper, something strong. The toast had been made, but the real celebration hadn't started yet. The truth was now in her hands, and she wasn't going to keep it a secret for long. Zahara slowly lowered her glass, her face still calm and beautiful, glowing in the warm light of the dining room. Laughter echoed around the table, and no one noticed the quiet shift in her energy. Under the table, her hand moved carefully, not in anger or fear, but with quiet purpose. Her fingers touched her phone, hidden in her lap. One tap, then another, and finally she pressed send. For a few seconds, everything remained the same. People were still eating, still smiling. Then suddenly, the lights dimmed slightly, and the projector behind Zahara flickered to life. At first, everyone thought it was a slideshow or a sweet surprise. But what appeared on the screen made the whole room freeze. Text messages appeared one by one, sweet, flirtatious messages from Tajudeen to another woman. Then photos, screenshots, hotel bookings, and finally, a letter. The same letter he had sent by mistake to Ifyananya, full of love meant for someone else. At the bottom of the screen, in bold white letters, it read, "To my beloved family, enjoy the truth with your dinner." Gasps filled the room. Forks dropped. Auntie Mambo's niece turned pale and covered her mouth. Tajudeen's smile vanished as he looked up at the screen in horror. His body stiffened. Words failed him. He opened his mouth to speak, but only silence came out. But Zahara didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She simply picked up her glass again and took another sip, slowly, like she was tasting a fine wine. Her eyes remained calm, steady, and cold. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shed a tear. She just let the truth speak louder than anything she could ever say. And in that quiet storm, she looked stronger than ever. The room went from full of joy to complete shock in just seconds. As the projector continued showing more texts, photos, and proof of Tajudeen's affair, loud gasps filled the air. People stared, eyes wide, mouths open. Plates were left untouched. Hands froze mid-bite. The woman in the bright red gele, Auntie Mambo's niece, jumped from her seat. Her face was burning with shame and anger. Without saying a word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the house, heels clicking fast across the floor, leaving behind a trail of silence. Tajuddin stood up, shaking. His face had lost all color. He opened his mouth but couldn't form a full sentence. I can explain. It's not what it looks like. I didn't mean. His words stumbled over each other like a child caught in a lie. His hands waved helplessly in the air, as if trying to wipe away the truth now glowing on the wall for all to see. But Zahara? She didn't move a muscle, except to raise her glass of palm wine to her lips. She took a slow, steady sip, her eyes cool, her posture graceful. Everyone around the table turned to look at her. There was silence. Even the kids had stopped whispering. Then in a soft and clear voice, Zahara finally spoke. Her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. I told Ifyananya I'd make dessert tonight, she said, placing her glass gently back on the table. Justice is sweet. Some of the guests looked stunned. Others looked at her with deep respect. Her calmness wasn't cold. It was powerful. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply let the truth speak, and now everyone had heard it. Zahara sat there like a queen at her own table, untouched by the storm she had unleashed. And in that moment, everyone knew, this woman wasn't broken. She was brilliant. The room was still buzzing with whispers, shocked faces, and quiet stares, but Zahara remained calm, sipping her drink like nothing had happened. Everyone was focused on the drama that had just unfolded, but what they didn't know was that Zahara wasn't surprised at all. This night, this dinner, this explosion, it was all part of her plan. Long before this dinner ever happened, Zahara had already filed for divorce. Quietly, carefully. She didn't shout, she didn't cry, and she didn't let her emotions ruin her strategy. She had found out about Tajuddin's affair weeks ago. It hurt her deeply, yes. But instead of reacting in anger, Zahara decided to be smart. She spoke with a lawyer. She gathered proof. And she knew that in her community, public shame would carry weight. She wanted everyone to know the truth, not just behind closed doors. If she had handled it quietly, people might say she was the problem. That's how things sometimes go. But if the truth was exposed in front of the whole family, in front of the elders, the aunties, the uncles, then no one could twist the story. She picked this dinner night for a reason. Everyone would be here. Both families. Witnesses. And now, with the projector revealing everything, her case wasn't just emotional, it was legal. She had the upper hand. In court, the evidence was strong. In the eyes of the community, she was the calm, faithful wife betrayed by a careless husband. Zahara didn't just want justice. She wanted it done properly, with power and grace. And tonight she got it. The guests thought they were coming to a simple family dinner. But Zahara knew they were actually coming to witness the truth. And now, no one could unsee what they saw. While the guests were still whispering and trying to make sense of everything they had just seen, Zahara stayed calm. But behind her peaceful smile was something much deeper. Quiet power. What the family didn't know yet was that exposing the affair was just the beginning. Zahara had already taken steps that would change everything for Tajuddin. Not just emotionally but legally and financially too. She had worked in silence. With the help of Ifyananya's lawyer friend in Abuja, Zahara had already started moving things into her name. The house where they lived, now under Zahara's name. The car that Tajuddin used to drive around, pretending to be the perfect husband, transferred. Even the small family business they both ran, the bank account, the documents, the ownership, all quietly shifted. Every signature, every paper was handled carefully, with no rush and no noise. Tajuddin had no idea. He was busy sneaking around with Auntie Mambo's niece, thinking Zahara was clueless. But she saw everything. She just chose to wait, to act when the time was right. And tonight, in front of both families, she hit the final blow. The affair didn't just break Zahara's heart, it broke his life. Now he would face divorce with no house, no car, and no business under his name. Zahara had played the long game. She wasn't loud. She didn't fight with the other woman, or cause a scene before she was ready. Instead, she used silence as her weapon. And when she struck with full force. The truth on the screen was just the surface. What came after would leave Tajuddin with nothing. No power, no excuses. He lost it all before he even knew what was happening. This wasn't just revenge. This was strategy. And Zahara had won. The room was still full of tension. But something had changed. The energy had shifted. At first, there was silence, people trying to process what they had just witnessed. But then slowly, heads began to turn. Not toward Tajudeen, who now sat frozen in shame, but toward Zahara. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown anything. She had simply let the truth do the talking. And now, one by one, hearts and minds were turning in her favor. The first to stand was someone no one expected, Tajudeen's own mother. She pushed her chair back slowly, walked around the table, and stood beside Zahara. Her eyes were sad, but her voice was firm. "You've carried yourself with more grace than he ever deserved," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. It was like a signal. The moment she spoke, others followed. The aunties began to nod in agreement, their gold earrings swinging as they murmured, "Zahara has been a good woman. A strong woman." The uncles looked at each other and sighed deeply. Even some of Tajudeen's own cousins clapped softly, shaking their heads in disbelief at what their relative had done. The cousins on Zahara's side cheered louder, not hiding their support anymore. They were proud. Ifyinanya didn't say anything at first. She simply leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a smug smile growing on her face. She had known this moment would come. She had helped build it. And now, watching her sister rise above betrayal with dignity, she couldn't be prouder. Tajudeen kept looking down, his hands shaking slightly, knowing that no one, not even his own mother, was on his side anymore. Zahara had not only exposed him, she had flipped the entire room. In just one night, the man who thought he had control lost it all. And the woman everyone once saw as quiet and modest, now stood taller than anyone else in the room. The dinner was over. The guests had all gone, their voices fading into the night. The chairs around the long table sat empty, some pushed back in shock, others left just as they were when the truth exploded. But in the middle of it all, two women remained, Zahara and her sister Ifyinanya. The plates were cold, the projector had gone dark, and the noise was gone. It was just the two of them now, sitting side by side, sharing a quiet moment of victory. In front of them sat a small plate with slices of soft chocolate cake. Zahara picked up her fork and took a slow bite, her face calm, her spirit finally at peace. Ifyinanya leaned on one elbow, watching her sister with proud eyes. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full. Full of strength, full of survival, full of truth. Zahara looked at the cake, then at her sister, and said with a soft smile, "He thought I'd break. But I was building something stronger." Ifyinanya laughed gently, the sound warm and rich. Zahara laughed too, and for the first time in a long time, the smile on her face wasn't hiding pain. It was real. The kind of laugh that comes not from revenge, but from freedom. From knowing your worth. They sat there a little longer, two sisters, two fighters, eating cake at a table that had once held secrets, but now held nothing but peace. And as the lights dimmed and the scene faded, their laughter echoed. The kind only women who've won without shouting can share.